The Bracero program, the exploitation of farm workers that changed two nations. The year is 1942, and World War II is ravaging the globe. But the war isn't just present on the battlefield. Farmers throughout the United States are leaving their fields to support their country in the war effort, while also seeking higher wages. Within a year, a shortage in agricultural workers and food supplies spreads across America. The government begins to ration staple foods, and individuals are issued ration books for certain foods each month. Still, prices skyrocket, and U.S. labor studies in May of 1942 find that over 1 million rural workers have moved to military and factory jobs. Searching for a diplomatically stable solution, the U.S. turns to Mexico. And soon, discussion and negotiation over the Bracero program begins. Lasting from 1942 to 1964, the Bracero program saw over 4.5 million Mexican men come to the United States to work in agriculture, performing back-breaking labor while often suffering from abuse and unfulfilled promises by the U.S., despite numerous diplomatic agreements between America and Mexico regarding their fair treatment and well-being. With its justification highly debated throughout history, the program developed a lasting dependency on foreign labor in the US and depressed wages among farm workers, but saved America's agricultural industry in a time of crisis and created opportunities for millions of men, many of whose legacies remain to this day. When the U.S. Department of State diplomatically approached Mexico in 1942, proposing the idea of a migrant worker program, Mexico was initially incentivized by the recent 10-year Mexican Revolution that had left many of their citizens in poverty, desperately seeking jobs. So on July 23rd, Mexican representatives Ernesto Hidalgo and Abraham Navas met in Mexico City with American representatives Joseph McGurk, John Walker, and David Meeker, starting a long series of diplomatic agreements between the US and Mexico for years to come. And after just weeks of negotiation, the first draft of the Bracero program was enacted. The Bracero program was amended many times throughout its 22-year existence, but despite the many renegotiations, it remained far from perfect. Come bring your hungry body to the goal. The word bracero means one who works with their arms, derived from the Spanish root brazo, meaning arm, and suffix ero, meaning one who works. This is a fitting demonstration of how they were viewed as nothing more than replaceable tools.
They could care less about the body or even less about the life. They didn't want that life in the United States, but they wanted those arms. So far as those arms could work, they were welcome, and when they couldn't, they were sent back.
The treatment they faced reflected this attitude. For example, braceros often had to perform stoop labor, where workers harvested crops in a hunched or squatting position for hours. This practice was extremely destructive, and later studies found that 1 in 20 braceros working in agriculture experienced severe long-term back problems. Additionally, braceros were consistently cheated out of their low wages of 30 cents an hour. 10% of braceros' income was sent to Mexico's Banco Nacional de Crédito Agrícola, with the promise that the workers would receive the money once they returned to Mexico. However, the money was almost never returned, and the bank later stated that 12 million pesos of braceros' wages had been used to fund day-to-day operations. Yet despite this exploitation braceros faced, the position was in extremely high demand, with thousands of applicants each year seeking opportunity in America. But it seemed everything might end on September 2nd, 1945, when Japan formally surrendered, bringing World War II to an end. Droves of farm workers began returning to their old employment, and a serious debate was raised. Should the Bracero program continue? Two sides emerged. Farm workers returning from war found their job positions occupied by Mexican laborers, and many hoped to send the braceros home. However, employers had been enjoying the availability of cheap labor and argued that braceros were still necessary. When domestic workers refused to work in arduous conditions, employers could simply hire a bracero for half the price, and they weren't inclined to surrender that power. The Mexican government was also supportive of the program's extension, as the 10% they were receiving from braceros' wages was greatly supporting the economy. The combined pressure for the Bracero program's continuance kept building, until it was eventually extended to the end of 1946. As the program was prolonged, civil rights activism was also on the rise. Activists Ernesto Galarza and Cesar Chavez were both instrumental in advocating for Mexican workers' rights. Galarza worked with the American Federation of Labor in 1948 to organize farm workers and fought fiercely for the Bracero program's discontinuation. One of Galarza's most popular books, Merchants of Labor, had an enormous impact on the way the public viewed the Bracero program, and was a contributing factor towards its termination. Meanwhile, another civil rights activist was striving for similar change, Cesar Chavez. Inspired by Gandhi, Chavez led peaceful protests throughout his lifetime, seeking the better treatment of American farm workers.
My fellow worker, come into the fold of unionism and help bring the agriculture worker into the fold of unionism.
Chavez founded the National Farm Workers Association to unionize agricultural laborers, and later led the highly successful Delano grape strike. Chavez's work gained him a large following, helping publicize the ugly truth behind workers' conditions in the Bracero program, and in America. However, despite the efforts of these activists to provide a voice for braceros, the large-scale benefits of the program and employers' desire for cheap labor made it difficult for any significant change to happen. Until September 17, 1963, when the Chuler bus crash struck, changing everything. At a railroad crossing outside Chuler, California, a freight train crashed into a makeshift bus, immediately killing 23 braceros. The event was described as the worst bus tragedy in U.S. history, becoming a rallying cause for upcoming civil rights movements. Initially, only 12 of the total 32 bodies were identified, as workers were traditionally distinguished by numbers rather than names. It was also revealed that the U.S. government had been categorizing farm workers as vehicle loads, alongside metal, wood, and hay. The Chuler bus crash quickly became the face of debate for braceros' justice, finally bringing outrage towards the long-ignored mistreatment braceros had faced. An audience of 9,000 attended the funeral of the total 32 victims of the crash, and national boycotts on food produce sent a clear message to Congress. The Bracero program had to end. Again, debate began to emerge, but this time the public outrage was too great. So in May of 1963, Congress announced that the Bracero program would be terminated by the end of the next year. Interestingly, although the program ended in 1964, there was no immediate surge of immigration back into Mexico. The year of the program's end, the total number of deportable Mexicans discovered in the United States was under 44,000. A year later, and this number had passed 55,000. The once temporary program had created the opportunities Mexican immigrants needed to start a new life, leading many to remain in America even after the program's termination. Today, some braceros' descendants live in America, thriving in the opportunity created by their ancestors.
My family means everything to me. My grandparents came from Mexico to give us a better opportunity and to help us live our lives. What helps push me towards my dreams is them. Their sacrifice makes me want to be great. I'm excited to announce that I'll be attending Stanford University.
Cesar Chavez once said, "From the depth of need and despair, people can work together, can organize themselves to solve their own problems and fill their own needs with dignity and strength." The story of the Bracero is indeed a tragic one, fleeing poverty in Mexico only to find more hardship and peril awaiting in America. But Braceros held tight to what they had left, their dignity and strength, and eventually the golden rays of opportunity emerged. And if we can learn from the mistakes of our past, value the desperate seeking a second chance, then together we may build a future where no one needs to suffer for opportunity.